Welcome, welcome, hello. I would love to see who's in the audience. If you could just put your name, if you feel comfortable, in the city you're calling from. Love to see who is in the audience. Welcome, welcome to Behind the Pages Conversations with Leadership Authors. This is the very first time we are ever doing this program. My name is Dr. Julie Pham, and I am the author of the new book, 7 Forms of Respect, a guide to transforming your communication and relationships at work. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Curiosity Based, a organizational development firm that is here in Seattle. And for this kickoff event, I get to be joined by Shelmina Abji, the author of Show Your Worth, 8 Intentional Strategies for women to emerge as leaders at work. Shelmina, thank you so much for being our first guest.
It is my pleasure. Julie, I think the world of you. I love you as a person. I love the work that you do, and I'm honored to be your first guest. Thank you for having me.
We are going to have a great conversation today, folks, because Shelmina is a renowned public speaker and a first-time author. So I want to because this is our kickoff event, I just want to share a bit of why Behind the Pages, Conversations with Leadership Authors. Well, what we know is that there are many conversations that are happening right now about diversifying the workforce, about diversifying leadership. And a lot of those efforts are being focused on changing the people in jobs. It's about recruitment. It's about promotion. Now, those efforts are important. And at the same time, most of the leadership books that we rely on are authored by white men. Now, I love my white male authors like Patrick Lencioni and Adam Grant. And I also think that there's space on these bookshelves for people who look like me and Shelmina. So I believe that if we want to enrich how we lead, we have to expand who we read. The analogy I like to use is that we are changing the actors, and yet they're reading the same scripts. So how do we expand the leadership narratives? So just remember, if you want to enrich how you lead, expand who you read, expand the perspectives that you're accessing. So let's get into it. Shelmina, I want to hear more about you. Could you tell me who are the role models in your life for leadership?
When I was growing up, Julie, I didn't quite know the term leader or leadership. I grew up in a small town in Tanzania called Mwanza. Very humble beginnings, but in hindsight, my role model and the leader that I admired the most when I was growing up was my mother. And this is why I have dedicated my book to her. You see, Julie, my mother was married when she was 14. She had her first child when she was 15. And she had 4 of us by the time she was 20. And because we came from humble beginnings, my mother had to work to supplement the income of my father. In those days, very few women worked out of the house, but my mom did. And what she did was she found the one talent she had, which was she was an excellent cook. She used to cook for us. And when we'd have guests over, everyone would compliment on what a great cook she was. And so she started cooking for others. In fact, she even sold food on the streets to make money so she could raise us. And so she taught me work ethic. She taught me how to use your talent to create value. She taught me that there is no shame in any job. And she also taught me that work is an opportunity, not a burden.
Mm. Wow, she sounds so inspirational and wow, quite entrepreneurial too, finding ways to feed four kids growing up in Tanzania. And I remember when we first met, you shared with me stories about your mother, and they were sprinkled throughout the book. And I just love that about your book. So, with your book, what inspired you to write it?
So, Julie, I left my corporate career at the peak of my career,
Mm.
actually. I was one of the highest ranking women of color at IBM. And I had this deep desire to pay forward. My definition of success was no longer getting the next title or getting the next paycheck. It was, how do I pay forward? I was very acutely aware of the opportunities I've had. Um, because you see, I come from a place where there are so many women who work harder than I do, who are way smarter than I am, but they are not given the opportunities that I was fortunate enough to have. And so I wanted to do something to pay the universe, if you will. And that journey led me to speaking. As you said, I have been speaking to corporations, conferences, universities, and I started sharing my insights on what made me successful, because that's what women wanted to know. They were craving for a blueprint. They are ambitious, they're smart, they wanted to succeed, but they didn't know how. And so they would share with me what their challenges were. Every time I spoke, I would have a line of women, sometimes 4 hours. They want to ask me questions about their career and their challenges. And Julie, you know what I realized? It didn't matter where I spoke, we all had shared experiences. We were all struggling with the same challenges. I had struggled with those challenges in my 29 years in my career at various stages in my career, and they were also struggling. So as I started sharing my insights, after a few years, they came back to me and they said, "Oh my God, based on what you said, I have a better relationship with my boss. Oh, based on what you told me, I got promoted. Oh, based on what you told me, I have a better work life balance." And that's when I realized that my insights not only helped me achieve success, it is helping all these women that I get an opportunity to speak to, an opportunity to mentor. It was helping them be successful. That's when I decided to extend my sphere of influence, my sphere of impact by writing a book. That was my motivation. And frankly, the women that confided me and shared with me their struggles are behind that motivation. Otherwise, I would have never known.
You know, Shelmina, I remember when we first met, I think it was in 2016, you were just starting your public speaking career. And it's been so inspirational to see the progress. And now with this book and what you were saying about how this book would have been so helpful for women starting out in their career. And I mean, I felt that when I read the book, and you can see all of my post-its here. Wow, there's so much helpful advice. And I know that a lot of the testimonials you had also say, gosh, I wish I had this earlier. So can you tell us a bit, what is the book about? Give us the cliff notes.
Okay. So, when I started writing the book, the audience that I had in mind are women in their first 10, 15, 20 years of their career, because those are the women that I spoke with more often than not. And I figured if I could share my insights with these women, then they will have the runway to apply my insights and then get to the highest levels of leadership within their companies. I am also learning that women in their mid-career are finding this book to be extremely helpful so they can rise to senior leadership roles. And so this book is really it's a blueprint. It's a blueprint that allows women who are aspiring to be leaders, or even women that want to have a successful career. You don't need to have a leadership title in order to be considered a leader at work. So I want to make that very clear. This is not about becoming a VP or becoming a senior vice president. This is about approaching your work as a leader. This is about having impact and influence over other people. And I wanted to share some strategies for these women to apply so they could transform their career, so they could achieve success in their careers.
So what are those strategies?
Yeah. So the 8 intentional strategies, frankly, are the strategies that I have picked based on what helped me achieve career success and what has helped other women when I was sharing my insights. The first chapter, perhaps the most important chapter, is truly understanding what success means to you personally, not what the society expects of you, not what anyone else tells you what you should do and who you should become. This is about going deep within yourself and understanding yourself, your values, your strengths, the culture you thrive in, what depletes you of your energy, what energizes you. You see, Julie, for us to have a thriving career, that self knowledge is
Mhm.
extremely critical. This way, we don't get driven by others because we know ourselves. And so the first chapter is about intentionally defining success.
Mm.
It's about creating a vision for who you want to be, where do you want to be, short term as well as long term. And this becomes your compass. This
Mm.
becomes the platform where you move towards and you make all those choices that are aligned with where you want to go. It's about setting the vision. And then the next strategies really are about executing. It's about moving towards that vision. And so the second chapter, I teach women how to create their personal strategic plan. You know,
Mm.
any business you run or I run or anyone runs, we have a vision and then we have a strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, we look at what is it that we're going to do and what is it that we're not going to do. And one of the first things I tell women to do is to become very intentional about where they focus their attention. The chapter is called Intentional Attention. You see, Julie, we all have 24 hours in a day. Our attention is our most valued asset. It's perishable. Once it's gone, it's gone. And so, if you can figure out how to harness your attention, how to focus your attention on your highest priorities, so each and every day you are moving closer and closer towards your definition of success. And then each chapter really layers onto it. So when you go to work every day, become intentional about creating value. I moved to the fourth chapter.
Mhm.
The third chapter is about work-life balance.
Mhm.
It kind of piggybacks on the second chapter. And just as you need to be intentional about where you focus your attention at work, we also want to be intentional about where we focus our attention outside of work. Because you see, we women, we are never just what we do. It doesn't matter how much you love your job. We're wives, we're mothers, we're sisters, we're friends, we're caregivers. And each one of these different roles gives meaning to our life. And so we must look at our life outside of work and be disciplined about it, just as we are about our life within our workplace. And you know, they feed off of each other. When you're energized at work, you will bring that energy to wherever you go outside of your work, and vice versa. So creating that equilibrium where you're able to thrive both in your work and your life is the third chapter. And Julie, there are a lot of personal stories of
Mhm.
how I did that.
I
As
love those stories.
you know, I rose up the career ladder when I was raising my two children as a single mother since they were 2 and 4. And so that became a forcing function for me to learn how to become intentional about the limited time I had. I had more to do than there were hours in the day. And so I became strategic. I became intentional. I made sure that I only focused my attention on what mattered to me. So I wasn't driven by outside factors. I was driven by what was important to me.
Mhm.
So now let's move to the fourth intentional strategy. And this is the strategy around intentional value creation. You see, Julie, all of us are hired for some expected value that we are going to create for our organization. People don't hire you because what you look like or what degree you have or where you went to school or where you come from. And I say this because I have hired thousands of people. When you hire someone, it's basically because you expect them to create a certain amount of value. And what I'm teaching my reader is when you become intentional about creating value at your maximum capacity in every interaction, the value you will create gets compounded, and it will way exceed any expectation. And then when you bring your authentic self into the mix, the value you create is value that no one else can create because no one else is you. And so I ask the reader to lean into their authentic selves. I ask the reader to create authentic value in all their interactions. And when they do that, they not only become essential to their organization, they also cannot be easily replaced or replicated. So every morning when you go to work, become very intentional about the value you create.
Shelmina, that was the value creation was the one that really resonated with me the most. So that was a huge aha when I got to that.
Okay. Because I am going to read later on, you're going to give me a chance to read from my book. That's what I'm going to read about. Because if the reader can capture that, then when they go to work every day, they will know why they are there and they will intentionally create value. But the next chapter is equally important, Julie, and that is the strategy of intentional growth. Because listen, if you are creating value at your maximum capacity, you will be doing extremely well in your current role. But frankly, what you want to also do is balance that with your future roles. Balance that with wanting to create even more value in the future. And the way you do that is by intentionally growing your competence, by intentionally growing who you are as a leader, intentionally growing your impact and your influence. And I share a story in the book. We won't go into the details of this, but Julie, I learned this from my mentor, who one day asked me, "Where do you want to be in 5 years?" And her name is Susan Whitney. And I looked at her and I said, "I don't know. I get so busy doing the best job that I can in my current role that I don't think about the future." And she said, "It's really important for you to do the best possible role in your current job, but it's equally important to know where you want to go next and next. That way, you're always working towards something bigger." It was an aha moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of women, we get stuck at a particular role because we are not seeking growth and we are not moving upwards in our career ladder. And that's why chapter 5, in the 5th intentional strategy, I am teaching the reader how to intentionally seek growth. And this is not just about an assignment that will grow you, but it's about showing up to work every day, seeking to grow. Every interaction gives you two opportunities. One is to contribute value. The second is, how does that interaction add value to you? And that is your growth. So seek to create value and seek to grow in every experience. And then the other intentional strategy, number 6, is about intentional relationships. You know, relationships are so important in our career. So many women don't quite recognize that. And we have to be intentional about building these relationships. We have to invest in these relationships in order to grow them. Particularly, I teach the women how to build relationships with their bosses, how to build relationships with their mentors, how to build relationships with your peers. And then, most importantly, the area where I find a lot of women not focused on is how to build relationships with your sponsors. The higher up you go in an organization, the more important it becomes for you to have your sponsors. Your sponsors are the people that are going to advocate for you when you are not in the room. And that brings me to the intentional strategy number 7, which is your personal leadership brand. Just as you want your sponsor to advocate for you when you're not in the room, you also want to create a brand, a leadership brand. So when people talk about you when you're not in the room, they look at you as if you are a leader because you have been behaving like a leader. I actually teach women that every impression you leave behind is creating your personal brand. Your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room, when they think about you, the image that they create. That is your personal brand. And you can influence that based on the impressions you're leaving behind in all your interactions. And as I rose up the corporate ladder, I understood the gravity of these two things, how you're known and who knows you. Because you see, Julie, the decisions about your career, whether it's you getting hired, whether it's your compensation, including your stock options, whether you get a promotion, whether you get the plum assignment, these conversations are had in a room where you're not present. And
Shelmina, one of the things I always, oh,
so we can influence our personal brand. And so I'm teaching women how to build a personal leadership brand in that intentional strategy of personal branding. You were asking a question I'll answer before I go into promotions.
no, and I just wanted to say that's one of the things actually I always appreciate about every conversation we have. You remind me, hey, is that the impression? You always give me tips and coach me on just the impression, and it makes me think about that. So I get the benefit of real life coaching from you on that particular intention. So that's just what I wanted to share.
Thank you. And I want the reader to understand this is not about pretending to be someone else so you can impress people. This is internal work. Even though it is about impressions you're leaving behind, the leadership brand is built based on how you show up. So the work is inside of you. This is not about impressing people. It is about impressing yourself, frankly. It is about becoming the person you want to become. So when you show up, you are leaving behind impressions that are aligned with who you are and how you want to be talked about when you're not in the room. It's very important that the reader understands this. And then the last strategy is intentional promotions. You see, Julie, people like you and me don't get tapped on our shoulder to say, hey, Julie, you've been doing a great job. Let me promote you. And part of it is because our leaders don't see leaders that look like us. And so they don't think of us when they have a leadership opportunity. And so it is upon us to position ourselves, to become worthy of that promotion, to ask for that promotion, and intentionally go after it. So that's the 8th intentional strategy.
Shelmina, thank you so much for sharing these. And as you went through them, I thought, wow, I think that this is relevant for everyone, not just women. Do you ever get asked that question?
I do. I actually do. Including my husband, and a lot of my male friends, and I have many of them. And frankly, I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for my male mentors and my friends. In fact, the foreword of my book has been written by my sponsor at IBM, who is a Black gentleman. His name is Rod Atkins. So, I'm a feminist. I want equality. I am not against men. However, my book is about my lived experience. And it's also about being a change agent. You see, Julie, 50% of the workforce today are women. We have more advanced degrees than men do. We get better grades in school than men do. And yet, at the very first promotion level, once you enter the workplace, depending on who you're reading, 66, 67 are men, and 33, 34 are women. We didn't become stupid overnight. We just don't understand how to navigate the corporate landscape. We don't understand how promotions are made. We don't understand how people move forward. And so to become a change agent for the number of women in leadership roles, I decided that I was going to focus my book on women. However, the intentional strategies will work for everyone aspiring to become a leader, especially underrepresented minorities, especially when we don't see people that look like us in our leadership ranks. It's very easy to start undermining our own selves. I did that too, Julie. I did that. It's easy to do that because you look around and you say, I'm never going to get there because no one's there that looks like me. But you cannot let that mental chatter prevail and get louder. You can shift that mental chatter and you can say, I'm going to be the Rosa Parks. I am not getting up from my chair because I belong there. This is not easy, but this is the work each and every one of us must do. We must blaze this trail so when the next generation enters the workforce, they will not have to deal with the same negative stereotypes, the same gender biases that prevail in our workplace today. We need to rise. If enough of us read this book, if enough of us rise up, if enough of us are seen and are visible in leadership roles, we will surely chip away, slowly, albeit, but we will surely chip away at those negative biases. We will be in the position to create inclusive organizations. We will be in the position to promote women. We will own the power to do that. But first, let us rise to the highest levels in the organization and also lift others as we go up.
Shelmina, one of the things that I really enjoyed about your book is that I felt like I got to progress with you because you share so many stories from the beginning of your career and about all of those growth moments, those painful moments, those painful lessons. And so it's not just, hi, I'm a big leader and I'm just telling you how to be like me. You actually tell us, you share with us how you got there. And it helps me relate to you so much more. And also what you said about this book being relevant and approachable for anyone who, especially those who are coming from underrepresented communities. For the series, I really want to highlight leadership books that are written from a particular lived experience and yet are right and can teach a much wider audience. And so I just want to share here that there in the design world, there's something called the curb cut effect. And what the curb cut effect is, just imagine on the sidewalk, you see that curb, right? And that curb cut was actually originally designed for those with wheelchairs. And then afterwards, think about all the other people who benefit from the curb cut, right? People, parents with strollers, people with luggage, delivery people carrying packages, they all can use that curb cut, even though it was designed for those with wheelchairs originally. And so I think about your book that way too. I mean, you have this audience in mind, and yet it's applicable to a much wider group, and you don't know who that's going to be. So.
Yeah. I agree, and I want to go back to, I talked about we will be in a position to build inclusive organizations. Today, Julie, as you know, the enlightened leaders have figured out that when we have women and other underrepresented minorities in leadership roles, the businesses themselves actually do better. And so there is a demand pull for women to rise up. And my book will help prepare those women. And in organizations where there is no demand pull, my book will create women leaders so they can enter those organizations and create a demand pull. You see, this problem is so big, Julie, that my book alone cannot solve it. This is why I need every reader who reads this book to never opt out of that leadership pipeline, no matter how difficult it is. And back to your comment about I have shared how I went up. It's important that we share. A lot of women, when they face challenges, they opt out thinking they're the only ones facing challenges. But the fact of the matter is, leadership is difficult. Leadership is a responsibility. If you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, which you should, because that's the only way you will recognize what your capabilities are, you will face challenges. And I want women to know that Challenges are an opportunity for growth. It's not, you don't opt out when you see challenges. You actually lean in and you learn and you grow and you keep going. And if each one of us does that, we will together create gender equality in leadership roles. Together, we will create representation in every room where decisions are being made.
Shelmina, your book is one of the sparks in a whole movement that's happening around the world. So just how do we get more women in leadership roles? So I want to hear, and I'm sure the audience wants to hear this from your book. Could you read us an excerpt? And as you pull that out, I just want to invite the audience, as you listen, please start chatting in, putting in your questions. And so and we will get to them after Shelmina reads this excerpt.
Okay. All right. I have this Post-it sticking because I know what I'm going to read. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this so you can actually see what I'm reading. When you show up to work every day with the intention of creating value at your maximum capacity in every interaction, the value you'll contribute will surpass all expectations and become a game changer for your career. Your value contribution will be reflected in your performance, your worth to your organization, and the achievement of both your short-term vision of success as well as your long-term vision of success. In addition to the value you create for yourself, seek to create value for the success of your stakeholders, including your peers, your clients, your boss, and your entire organization. The higher and the more unique your value, the harder it is for anyone else to replicate your value or replace you. You become essential to the success of your organization. For any leader, it's always clear which employees are most essential to the leader's success and the success of the organization as a whole. Retaining these employees is a key priority. They're the ones getting promotions, stock options, higher salary increases, awards, and more. When they want something, a growth assignment, flexible hours, time off, etc., they're in a position of power to negotiate because their company needs them just as much, if not more, than they need the company. Such is the power of the value you create for your organization. With all of that being said, as an underrepresented minority, I know firsthand that there are many internal and external barriers that could potentially sabotage your ability to contribute value at your maximum capacity. And we'll work together to tackle those in this chapter. When I started my career, I allowed my internal barriers to sabotage my ability to create value at my maximum capacity. As I shared earlier, my first job out of college was as a software developer at ETA Systems with a salary that allowed me to lift my family out of poverty. I was excited to start my job. At first, I went to work every day with a spring in my step, and I poured my heart into my work. I was living the dream, and I was deeply aware of how lucky I was. Soon I found myself, that's the Blue Angels in like many other women in the technology field, the only woman or one of the very few in every room. Meeting after meeting, memo after memo, I began to realize that none of my coworkers looked like me or spoke like me. They had degrees from well-recognized and even Ivy League colleges. Many of them boasted master's degrees and PhDs. They were all more experienced and more credentialed than I was, and they all had bigger titles. I started comparing myself with them and convinced myself that there was nothing I knew that they didn't already know. I started to wonder if I belonged there. This put me in a pattern of undermining my own capabilities and underestimating my own worth. That's where I started.
Thank you, Shelmina, for reading that. And I'm going to see what questions from the audience. And as we wait for that, that mental chatter that you've referred to numerous times, and you call that the power quotient. That's one of my favorite parts about this book, that you scan your mental chatter and then intentionally choose an empowering response to a disempowering stimulus. How often, when you're talking to your to women and to mentees, does this come up? How often is this something that you find is pretty common? Is that why it's in your book? Or
Actually, I find it to be extremely common. The internal barriers that we erect are the barriers we erect for ourselves, like I did, just from what I read. I started undermining my own capabilities. And whether the stimulus is internal or external, you see, when the stimulus is positive, you create a positive reaction to it without even thinking about it. But when the stimulus is negative, all these voices in your head start creating this negative mental chatter. And if you're not careful, you will react and give your power away to the stimulus. But if you understand that your power lies in your response, you have the power to scan your mental chatter, to take a deep breath and pick an empowering response to a negative stimulus. So in my case, when internally my voice of fear was telling me, don't speak up, that you might sound stupid, they might fire you, I then had to slow down that negative mental chatter and create my own voice of courage, make it louder, and say, but I have ideas that matter. I have the capacity to create value. In my case, Julie, if I didn't figure out how to create that value, I was on a 1 year student visa and I would have gone back to poverty very, very quickly. So that became a forcing function where I had to understand how to overcome my fear, how to overcome those internal barriers that were stopping me from creating value at my maximum capacity, and to scan my own mental chatter and to pick a response that allowed me to create unique value. You see, it's we own that power of choice. So many of us don't recognize just how powerful we are, because the way we behave, proactive action as well as reaction or response, is entirely up to us. And when we don't use it, we give our power away. When we use it, we exercise what I call our power quotient. Just like you have your IQ, you have your EQ, you also have your PQ. And once you start exercising your power, you get better and better at it. You will never give it away. You will never be driven by any external forces. You will always be driven by who you are and where you want to go and how you want to behave.
so, Shelmina, does that mean that the mental chatter goes away entirely, or just happens less often, or when it pops up, you're like, go away, go away? I
It
mean, as your career evolves, how does that? What is it? I mean,
never
even for
goes
you in writing this book, did any mental chatter come up for you as you were writing the book?
a million times. Every time you push yourself outside your comfort zone, it's going to show up. It will show up, guaranteed. But the more you understand that you don't have to give your power away to that negative mental chatter, you own the response. Now, I say befriend your fear and say, I hear you, because your fear, frankly, Julie, is trying to protect you. Okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's trying to protect you, but we don't want to be protected. We want to step outside our comfort zone. We want to figure out what we're capable of becoming. And so what happens is, it's like a muscle, right? The more you do it, the better you get at it. Do you become perfect? Does it never show up? Hell no. But we're not seeking perfection. We are seeking
Mm-hmm.
progress. And so the more you do it, the better you get at it. And in my chapters, I have exercises where I reflect and celebrate and course correct, because mistakes we make. It's okay. Be kind to yourself, be compassionate with yourself. Look back and celebrate what you have achieved. Don't beat yourself up, because that depletes you of your energy. Know that everyone makes a mistake. And so if your mental chatter went crazy and you reacted, it's okay. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. reflect upon it. Think about what would you have done differently. And so the next time a situation like that arises, act differently.
Mm-hmm. So, Shelmina, with the time that we have left, I want to ask you about writing the book, because you're a leader who wrote a book about leadership. There are many leaders out there, but a lot fewer who actually write books. So when you're talking about this mental chatter coming up, what was the hardest part about writing the book for you?
You know, Julie, writing a book is not my core competence. In fact, I wouldn't even say that it's my competence. There are things I'm exceptionally good at doing, there are things I'm somewhat good at doing, and then there are things I'm not good at doing. And writing a book actually falls in that third bucket. But I was called to write this book because of these women, because my insights had helped so many women that I wanted to extend my sphere of influence and my sphere of impact. And so my mental chatter was going crazy all the time. And there were times when I gave into it. But then when COVID hit, it became a forcing function that I started writing every single day. And so when your calling is greater than your mental chatter, you will figure out a way. You do figure out a way. You get the help you need, but you figure out a way to get it done, because that definition of success, that writing that book became so much more important than any mental chatter, that I prevailed.
I love that. The when your mental chatter is, or when your calling is louder than your mental chatter.
Mhm.
In your acknowledgments, you point out that your daughter actually taught you the difference between writing and speaking. I was intrigued by that. Could you share a little bit more about what that meant?
Yeah. So my daughter Sophia is an exceptionally good writer. Um, and I love to speak, as you know. And I am an exceptional speaker. I speak and they pay me lots of money to go speak, because my insights actually really energizes women to become successful. But when I started writing, it was not working out well. And so I was struggling with it, and I'm thinking, I know the substance, I know the subject matter. Why am I not able to put this on paper? And Sophia said, Mom, when you speak, your energy and your emotions convey the messages loud and clear. And I get energy from my audience. So when I'm on the stage, I'm on fire. But when she says, Mom, when you're writing, none of that comes through. And so speaking and writing are two different things. And so you will need to learn how to bring that emotion, how to write about it, how to express and to tell stories that resonate with people without your energy and your enthusiasm on the stage. And so that was a lesson that I had to learn. I had editors that helped me, Julie. I did not want to hire a ghostwriter, because it was important to me that this be in my voice and that I do this. But I got a lot of help. And my daughter was one of them who helped me, one of the editors who helped me with my manuscript before I submitted it. And then the editor from McGraw Hill, Cheryl Segura, helped me take the manuscript to the next level. So, yes, I had a lot of help.
That's such a good point about when you're speaking, there's all this energy that you can interact with, and yet writing, there's just this page and it doesn't say anything back to you. So I hadn't thought about it that way. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, so in closing, what about you? What leadership authors are you reading right now?
Just like you said, there are books today. There are books. I'm reading your book, for example. I'm reading a book from Ruchika. I'm reading a book from Minda Zeitlin. These are, women writing books. And I am so glad, because when I was growing up, and don't get me wrong, I learned a lot from these books. The books that I read were Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Tom Peters' In Search of Excellence. At that time, there were no books that were written by women of color. Today, you can read Indra Nuyi's book. I mean, there are so many books you can read. Eve Rodsky's books that she has written. And I love the fact that there are women that are writing, and there are women of color that are writing. And I know firsthand that writing is not easy. But I also know firsthand that we must write, we must tell our stories, we must talk about our struggles, our challenges, but also about our triumphs, because we want to show women how they don't have to go through the same struggles and challenges and take as much time to overcome them as we did. They don't need to reinvent the wheel. They can learn from us and accelerate their success.
Yes, I remember in your book you said that once you went from being a sales expert to a leader, you started to teach yourself leadership and reading all these leadership books, and yet there were none written by, or very few written by, women at the time. And so it's so great to see just how much more we've progressed in that. And one of the things that Curiosity Base does, my company does, is we actually research and curate these lists of leadership books authored by women, by different BIPOC communities, by those with disability, LGBTQ, and to show that, wow, there are actually a lot of books available. So, and now, and your book is, we actually had your book listed on this for both the women and the Asian American list this past spring, even before it came out. So in closing, I just want to do pitch for Shelmina's, Shelmina, well, actually, I'm going to turn Shelmina. What would you like to say in closing?
Well, for everyone that's listening and for everyone that is going to read my book, first of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank you to aspire to become a leader. I want to thank you because you're investing time in yourself to grow yourself. My request to you is to never give up on yourself, to always take a chance on yourself, and to not opt out when things become challenging, because we must blaze the trail for the next generation. And so if my book can help you become the leader you're capable of becoming, then for me, my life will be well lived. It's my legacy. This is what I want to leave behind. And I want to help more women become leaders, and become leaders that are respected, that are admired, that their mere presence becomes an inspiration for other women to also become leaders.
Thank you so much, Shelmina. Yes, I highly encourage you all to get the book. And there's information in the chat that tells you about it. Oh, Shelmina, thank you for holding up my book. There's 7 Forms of Respect right there. So thank you so much. And just in closing, you can keep learning more about the next in this series by subscribing to the Curiosity Base newsletter. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn. And then please stay in touch with Shelmina. She's got the contact information. You can also contact me as well through LinkedIn. And thank you for being here. And there will also be a recording. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks, everyone.